think this is going to be the last video on the details. I've done quite a lot this week, because really I've come back to the charts. I haven't really been on the charts for various reasons. Missed some trades this week, one in particular that I would have liked to have taken that I just missed just because I wasn't up on time. So, but I'll still make use of the analysis I've done, and honestly I've avoided quite a few trades that look decent on the face of them, but yeah, it's the details, and they've saved me most of them, I think, some losses. And I'll take a look at the one that's pending, like might come in, and that was probably the one that I did want to trade if I was going to trade one of them. But that's all right. Sometimes you miss some, but confident in the analysis that I've done, and it was the right decision for me to make, even despite getting a win. I'll start on US dollar, Canadian dollar. Now this was the weekly for it. There's nothing really that telling on the weekly, other than we've already had this fair value gap. Starting to follow it through, and it looks like we'll create another one here, which is quite nice. I think on the monthly, no, there's nothing on the monthly. So this was actually quite reasonable, to be honest, this one. And I think it still might be that I'm looking at something on the 4 hour. Have a look. But on the daily, there wasn't really much to say other than we had come into this overlapping resistance. We bounced off that. But what is quite nice that we didn't... This would be the point that you'd want to trade above to stop yourself creating a bearish fair value gap. So that would not be nice, and add to... Well, actually, I need to big screen this. And add to what's already the bullish argument. The only thing is here, that which is a bit noteworthy, that is order flow hasn't really been tested since we've not retraced, and then when we have retraced, we've not actually retraced into a PD array. That's the only thing that would sort of ring alarm bells here so far. And on the 4 hour, okay, 4 hours actually looking pretty nice, but the problem with this is that whilst we've got this 4 hour gap, which has gone through that I'm not sure what this line was, because the one above's the daily resistance. Oh, that's the, yeah, okay. That was the fair value gap line. Trade above that to not create the SIBI, and then that was just that was the rejection of this resistance. Obviously we had the first rejection of the candle, and then second, and if that rejection's really going to be respected and continue, we should not trade above this high. That should be a protected high, so the 2CR really. But the fact that we have tagged it is a sign that it's a bit more bullish. So on the 4 hour, we had this, and it looks nice, and we have now stung into it at 6 o'clock, so I think in a couple of hours time. This could have been decent, but there's not, because it's a US major pair, and it's not an Asian pair. It's not really in session, although it would be a swing, but there is no... I don't think there's any red folder news for it tomorrow. I'll have to look on Monday. I wouldn't particularly want to hold a trade over the weekend, just because of politics and stuff at the moment. But yeah, the reason why this one wasn't or might not be great is because on the DXY, there's actually no... there's no 4 hour PD array, at least. I always look for a 4 hour PD array that DXY can continue off of, even if it looks to be quite clean, which it does. It just looks like it wants to continue upwards. right? It just met this resistance, and then it met this order block here, and we just had a little bounce off that. But you can see on the daily it's breakaway, and then on the 4 hour there's also not really PD array to continue off of apart from the sweeps here of that liquidity. And so I would personally prefer there to be a PD array to continue off of, especially as we're coming into resistance. So that is why that Canadian dollar one for me, I don't really think I'm going to go for it. Despite the DXY looking fairly clean. And then I'll move on to the next one. CHF. US dollar CHF. I'll just quickly go over the weekly, monthly even. Okay, so the monthly, we've come into this bearish fair value gap. Something to note about this monthly is that we came pretty close to this draw on liquidity. At that point, for me, it doesn't make sense to then retrace back here, then to go down here. But it's fairly 50-50. It's not too bad of a retrace to make. For me, it doesn't make sense. On the weekly, we had this fair value gap, but we've not come back to it. We've just continued to go. We had this SIBI on the other side of the market. We'd stung it once, stung it twice, gone down, failed to create a fair value gap downwards, and then created one upwards. So that would tell us that, hey, maybe this is going to fail. So this would be a bit of a unusual context sort of trade with this as the last line of defense, aiming for that. On the daily, I think there's not too much other than the fact that we've come into this resistance. This was quite nice that we had this fair value gap and mitigation block with each other, but we haven't come back to it, which is a bit of a shame. And so the 4 hour, where bulk of it is, see what I've written. Also want the DXY, saying we want the PD array support plus goes through the daily, which you didn't want. Okay, so the main thing is here, you had this 4 hour to continue off of. You had 4 hour overlapping with this mitigation block, and you also had this nested one here, fair value area, nested fair value area, which is quite nice. But this orange line, that is a line I only wanted to see us trade into the top one and not into this, because at that point on the daily, we're failing to create a new fair value gap if we trade into that orange line. That's why I didn't really want to see it, although now that we've got such a strong rejection, it is kind of an immediate rebalance type thing. You could consider it as, but ultimately, again, the DXY, I'm just not sure where the support is, as we don't have a 4 hour PD array, or obviously a daily or a weekly, so I'm not too sure. And yeah, there's no CHF news tomorrow, no US dollar news. So despite what is a really nice rejection, there's sometimes where you don't want to see a retrace, and that is when retracing means you don't make a higher time frame fair value gap. So yeah, that was that. They were fairly decent, but I didn't think I was going to trade them just because, as I say, the dollar, I didn't really have anywhere where I thought the dollar could continue from. And then, so I did silver last video. So this is really just a continuation. This one I had amber on. I did a big analysis on Australian dollars to Swiss franc a couple videos ago. And ultimately, so what we had from the videos a couple videos ago, I won't go into the rest of it, but you had a lot of things telling you, it's a bit shaky. And before literally yesterday, I was thinking, okay, but we're still a bit more bearish than bullish. But we had this rejection, and I was really, if I was going to get involved, I really wanted to see another strong candle after that. And we didn't get that. We didn't get a strong candle after that. and we swept it, and we started to continue upwards, and I think we had news here. Australian dollar, it would have been in the morning. Yeah, I think this is the news. But why did I not want to end? Because I put, a bit of consolidation price up to date, but clue seems out. Yeah, so once we didn't continue from this 4 hour and we made this one, which is quite big, I only wanted to see it sting into this overlapping bit and look for a continuation upwards, which now, you know what, it might actually happen now, but yeah, I was just favouring the other one, the GBP, whatever it was, just because this price action, it kind of seems a bit of seek and destroy to me. The saving grace here was that this, entering off this, you had a target that's really inside the context, which is nice and easy to hit, even if you're in a bit of that consolidating price action type movements. But yeah, it's just not something that I would have wanted to see. You know, this Sibi failing, then this one, and then I just immediately flip. But I can see how it goes higher. So if it comes through, it comes through, and that's fair enough, because there was also news this morning. So I'll have to see with that. But what I was liking a bit better, and because the news, we have GBP news tomorrow as well as the Australian dollar news. See, this one might come in within one candle, nice and strong. This one was, I've got it here, similar to Australian dollar CHF. If I go on the weekly, bit of a nothing weekly. The only thing to take into account is that we are sweeping both sides with no PD arrays. So we swept this weekly low, seemed to follow through as we're not coming back to this low, and then we swept this weekly high. And yeah, that's as far as we get on the weekly. Then on the daily, the most recent one here, the sweep of this weekly high, we didn't even create a fair value gap, which shows weakness, and that we could continue lower. And then on the 4 hour, so before getting into the 4 hour, the key thing is really here on this one, there's no sort of arguments from above where that's particularly, you know, price could go one way or the other, because it's not hit any really significant PD arrays. It's just a couple questions of, are you following through on your rejections or not? But there's not, unlike the Australian dollar CHF one, which had fair value gaps overlapping with mitigation blocks on either side of the market. That one was a bit more complicated and a bit more choppy. So therefore this one had less higher time frame interference, really. And get to the 4 hour, this also had quite nice market structure here, as we had this 1 4 hour, we trade into it, and we create another 4 hour fair value gap, and that signals that this is an intermediate term high on the 4 hour, and this is an intermediate term low with two fair value gaps on separate price legs. That is order flow confirmed. And so why didn't I get involved with this? It was simply these two candles here. We had a nice rejection off this overlapping bit with this candle, and because it was a nice rejection, when I saw that again we had swept this and it didn't, I would have liked to see a bit more down action on the candle, because if you just take Fibonacci, right, that's not the best, but you can see almost half the candle still an up candle, really. So, you know, upward movement from here. And obviously I applied the trap trader analogy. I wouldn't really want to see us trade above this high again, especially because this fair value gap was quite a big one. I would have just wanted to see a sting, then continuation. So Really, I would have liked to see this really narrow down to almost a down candle or a down candle to get involved, or just not see us sweep this again. Just a simple continuation off of this respect candle. Another variation that I wouldn't have actually minded would be a bit of a low close here, then a sweep of this candle, but 2 rejections I'm not as keen on. And so, you know, maybe this one comes in, and this one was the closest that I was coming towards taking, just because no high time frame interference, and the 4-hour market structure was also nice. And GBP news tomorrow, but that's another thing actually, because I thought if we've swept it, price action isn't as strong. The 2 candle rejection is basically a 3 candle rejection now. It's not as strong as if we were to just straight reject, and I did not want to get caught out with the red folded GBP news in the trade and it come back and I get slipped on the stop loss. So that's why I wanted the strong indication, along with, whilst the high time frame, no interference is a good thing, it's also, well, you haven't got as much high time frame support. So yeah, that's why I didn't take it. And yeah, maybe it comes through, and shame, but the analysis is the analysis, and I'm fine watching this go. So yeah, that's that, and just a small details part 2 really, I guess.